Hey everybody, it's Sherman. Welcome back to the Slowest Blitz, turn 31. After a bit of a hiatus, I moved. So, as you may be able to see behind me, we're in a new spot. So yeah, it's been a while getting used to everything, getting everything in place and situated, and then being able to get back into the swing of things. So I do apologize for that, but let's not spend too much time on that. Let's jump back into things and talk about turn 31, which I think is probably one of the big pivotal moments in this game. So, we will jump in. We completed Enchantment 5. On our way up to Enchantment 6, we did an arcane probing, didn't find anything, and then we see two very important attacks. So, more of a recap to myself than to the people watching, because presumably you've just watched turn 30. The war against Asphodel and Phaeacia has been one of me slowly eking out victory over Phaeacia in the south, and slowly fighting defensively over Man. What did I say earlier? Man and Phaeacia. Slowly fighting defensively against Man in the north, right? But over the last two turns, Man has consolidated forces and hit a bunch of my provinces around Asphodel, and I was worried about what would happen, right? We do have a massive force in the Shadowglade, I think it is, or Shade Forest, on our throne, which is right next to our capital, but right, like moving, finding the fight that we want to fight is dangerous, fraught, right? Especially as we are trying to move up to that Enchantment 6 for the concept of Rigor Mortis, right? I believe is the main focus that we're going. So, we can see this turn is the turn that that Man pulls the trigger and comes in on our capital on Asphodel. And this is a ginormous force. Right? And this is a force that we do have to worry about, because obviously we have a massive amount of mannequins, but our killing power is relatively low. And the killing power of the mannequins, right, like we've done the math previously, it really lies in that concept of overwhelming the Knights of Avalon. If we can get 4 to 8 mannequins per Knight of Avalon, right? Because you got to keep in mind, these guys will generally kill multiple mannequins a turn. So if we can vastly overwhelm them, we can fatigue them and then kill them. Especially if we have other units in the mix. But this is a humongous herd of unicorns, which are not nearly as threatening as the Knights of Avalon, obviously, right? But they do help to chaff against us, right? And they are still quite dangerous, especially with this alicorn. They can still very easily kill mannequins, and kind of combat our ability to overwhelm Man. So we've got the Divine Blessing up, reminder for myself. We've got shock resistance, poison resistance, fire resistance, cold resistance. So we just got a resistance spread, HP 3, strength 3, enchanted blood, blood surge, and heroism 140. So these things hit pretty fucking hard for a mass summon. And are surprisingly defensive, right? So we don't have a lot of really good magical options. They have a decent amount of HP. Obviously, their protection is very low. So our killing units can kill the shit out of them. But again, the issue is just the sheer mass and quantity not overpowering so much, but preventing our mass and quantity from killing. So we get a little bit of a run back as our flyers engage. And this is just our PD. So nothing is going to happen here. But the important thing is we get to kind of see what he's rocking, right? 77 Knights of Avalon, 140 Unicorns, and we know this is just what's on our capital. There are other forces within striking distance of our capital. So that is a big consideration. We have a battle in Trottern. Looks like... there's a bunch of fucking barbarians here, so this might not work out for us. I gotta get a new mouse. My mouse wheel has been really lately. So it looks like we do rout them, but we are also routed and losing everything. Do we survive? I don't know. We'll see. Has been conquered by our forces. Okay, so it looks like it went better in the actual game. We are also hit in Forest of the Lost. Or hitting in Forest of the Lost. We got a bunch of mannequins here. This is just PD. Single PD, no dice, no worries. We attack in Shade Forest. So we had a bunch of counter-raiding parties this turn. Easy there. We took control of Illidar. We attacked in the Impassable Mountains. And this is one of our stacks of Jade Maidens. So we have two Centaur Hierophants back here, blessing up a bunch of Jade Maidens, and we run into nothing. So should be no issue. Our maidens didn't even get into the fight. Okay, Impassable Mountains, cool. We attack in Kingdom of Dara, just kind of like harrying man. Now this is a small stack of Mantis. I believe we had used it already on something else. But they are very killy. So, do we win this? I bet we actually lose this in the real one. So we won right there. No, we did win. Okay, cool. Hit them up. So we are attacked in Sitha. So this is another example, right? Like, so that 77 Knights of Avalon and 140 Unicorns, that we can take, right? That combined with all of these longbowmen, a stack of landless knights, and a bajillion monks, that's where the issue lies, right? You know, because I've read some people's comments of like, hey, why didn't you attack here, or why didn't you attack there, blah 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 blah, and obviously, right, like it's a strategy game, so there's always that kind of scenario of maybe I could have won this prior battle or done this other thing, but the essence lies in the concept that to win a battle with man, without some key features, without some key magic. To win a battle with man, it's gonna risk all of what I have versus all of what he can bring to bear, and if I lose that, it's just game over, right? So this is tense, right? This is a lot of, and I wouldn't even say chaff, right? Like the wolves are chaff, sure, but these longbowmen hit hard, right? Like these longbows are no joke. This will kill most mannequins in 1 or 2 shots, and it can also absolutely deal with my black centaurs, right? Firing squad, especially with the way that I play with them a lot of the times on the flanks, black centaurs running up into this firing line, because you remember, generally speaking, the way that the game plays, the closer you are to a ranged attack, the better the accuracy on that ranged attack, the better the precision. So these guys can just unload into something like a Black Centaur, which is potentially going to wither them down very quickly. So here we just have a little bit of PD. There's nothing doing there. So 167 longbowmen, 29 knights, 32 monks. That's a bitch and a half to deal with right there, right? Very importantly, we also got attacked on Shadowglade, and we did have a little bit of reinforcement here. I thought, like, I remember back to this turn, I thought that I had put out more, right? With the concept of not wanting to be locked into Shadowglade. But I remember afterwards, I had made that decision, right, where I was juggling with the concept of if he full sent a lot onto Shadowglade, and I didn't put out enough, but I put out a fair amount, he could have just wiped it, right? And my goal really was to get to Rigor Mortis as soon as possible. So, with that being said, I do have a little bit of a force, but probably not enough to deal with this. Now, we've got some black minotaurs here, and we've got a fair amount of centaurs. The centaurs really aren't going to do much, but the question is, do these black centaurs get blessed? And if they do, how well do they match up against the Knights of Avalon? Because we haven't really been able to see this. We've only had the black centaurs for a few turns at this point. So this is really an unknown for me at the game because of when the patch hit. And so we can see, right, like, when they are unsupported, the Black Minotaurs, they'll go in, they'll get their Berserking buff, but it's just so much damage coming in from the Lance Charges, the Broadsword, the Alicorn Horn, the Hoof. So much damage coming out pound for pound that it just blitzes through the Black Minotaurs. Now, obviously, if the Black Minotaurs are supported with chaff and or buffs or things like that, I think, you know, they are going to hit hard enough to actually cleave through these Knights of Avalon. But in this particular instance, they did not have those supporting features. So this is going to end up being just chop, right? Like, these Knights of Avalon are just going to come in and absolutely blitz what we have here. So, we've got Shadowglade. He does lose 4 Knights of Avalon for 6 Black Minotaurs. That's not really a worthy trade. I guess it's a worthy trade gold-wise, but we also lose a shit ton of Centaurs. So, overall, it's not a worthy trade for us gold-wise. So, that's bad. That's really bad. We get hit in Vanguard as well. Little raiding party. 1 PD. Nothing big happening there. Then we get to witness a battle against Abysia in Bandar Log. Is this in Bandar Log? No, this is in Varseer Mountains. So this is the last remaining fortress that Bandar has, aside from their capital. Let's see, they only have 2 mages here, so not expecting a huge, you know, amount of survival. Some crazy outplay or anything like that. Yeah, it just looks like this is going to be a sitting at the gates kind of shebang. And then they're broken. Pretty easy peasy. So, for their trouble, this costs Abysia 2 archers, 6 crossbows, 1 human bread, and 4 salamanders. Pretty easy scenario there. But that doesn't mean Bandar Log is completely down and out. They're on the way down, obviously, right? Because they've been kind of like me. They've been fighting in a probably worse than me, honestly. Because they've been attacked by Abysia, they've been attacked by Agartha, and they've been attacked by Nabah, I believe, at varying different stages. Like, I don't believe Nabah's still fighting them. I believe they fought them for a very brief amount of time and then peaced out. But since then, they kind of like me with Olm, right? Like, there was a very brief clash, and then since then, Bandar Log has been fighting Agartha and Abysia. And really been punishing both heavily, but been bleeding out slowly over time. But Bandar Log does still have a very large contingent of Tiger Riders, I believe, that are a massive threat. So, there's that. And then finally, speaking of Phaeacia, we have a battle at the Fortress of Vaclez. So, We have our arrayed forces, bunch of minotaurs, bunch of mannequins all over the place, big stack of black centaurs. We have a big contingent of carrion behemoths. We have some jade maidens in the background, some chaff in the background, more jade maidens in the background. And we have the entirety of Phaeacia's roster. They have spent their time summoning a bunch of Blackhawks. Which is a little concerning with my backlines. We've got some Clockwork Men, a fair amount of Clockwork Soldiers, actually. Some Yetis, then we have a fair amount of Orichalcum Guard, Colossi Heavies, and just some mixed other stuff, right? In the lineup, we've got a bunch of Colossi Weavers, right? Which is really interesting and very dangerous. He has a lot of magic here, including his Titan of Forethought, which does have some gems on it, so we'll be keeping an eye on what's going on there. We are not magicless, though, in this particular fight. We have brought forth some Panic Apostates, we have a couple of Dryad Hags here, a couple of Hierophants, and we do have a Howlcaster here as well. So, let's watch this from a little bit of a bigger overview. Archery exchanges. Let's watch initial thing. We got a bunch of Body Ethereal, Personal Mistform, Earth Powers, Protective Winds, Earth Powers, that jazz. We've got Group Bark Skins going out. We've got Quick Roots going out. More Group Bark Skins, really trying to paint our higher tier units, right? Along with doing Divine Blessing. And all of those fucking hawks just immediately drop around my black centaurs. Which, the black centaurs are going to murder them, but it also means that they're gonna kind of like be paused momentarily. Howl comes down, and really this feels like this is a play for time on the part of Phaeacia, right? Because they have a lot of casters here, and the idea, presumably, is tie me up for as long as possible so that those casters can really start to get things going. We have Twilight coming down, so all units have minus precision, which is interesting because I think this actually hurts him more than me. But he also has Glamour Mages getting +1, right? So he, I think, has a couple of intentions for high glamour. I don't know if he actually has a lot of high glamour mages. He has a couple of glamour mages that are going to get boosted here. And so the Hawks are mostly dealt with, and it's now a bunch of battling in the center, right? We don't have our current strategy of the Carrion Behemoths being body etherealed so that they can go through the wall, which I think would have been really good here. And unfortunately, our Minotaurs are just not big enough to trample through his size 4 units. So we're not getting like a trampling mass through things like we would otherwise. Which means this is just a big choke point. And that means his people are back here vanishing. Most of them are already fatigued out, though, except his god, which is just going crazy with the buff cycles, Brute Blur, etc., etc. So let's see. Let's just speed this up and see how this actually goes. Because this is not good for us, right? Like, this concept of just being stuck in the choke point. This is absolutely bad. Will we win or will we break? Fortunately, what is going into the meat grinder is pretty high tier units for us. A bunch of black centaurs, some minotaurs here or there, etc., etc. And now, this is kind of what I expected, right? I kind of expected that we would get more consistent evocations coming out from his team. I actually think this is a bit of a replay bug. If I remember correctly, we actually had a fair amount of lightning bolts initially, but then they did swap over to other things, like starfires or something like that, which just didn't do as well. But eventually we do break through, we begin to swarm. His Titan is very thick, though, and very dangerous, so breaking through him is probably going to be fairly costly, if we are successful at all. A little bit of damage. Kind of just plinking away. This guy has a lot of layered defenses right now. Yikes. Big yikes! If he had regeneration, he probably would be able to just solo this, honestly. I wonder if he tried to get regeneration and was unable to do so. That's that. Okay, so this looks like a win, but with massive casualties. But it actually was not that bad. In truth, this went way better for us in the real fight than it looked to have gone right there. We did lose 73 units. Most of those were just mannequins, though, of various different types. We did lose about half of our Minotaur warriors. We did lose 11 of our Black Centaurs. That's not an insubstantial number, but to finish off, like, last stand a player, that really I don't think is super bad, especially considering we didn't really have great tools at this point to really finish off a defending player, right? And we were up against, I mean, honestly, you can just they killed one thing. The 200 Blackhawks, really not an issue. They killed one thing. You can just ignore them. They just honestly probably helped to HP route the overall battle. But right, 14 kills from the Colossi Queen, 37 kills from the Titan of Forethought, a fair amount of work coming in from their magic, but not nearly as bad as it could have been otherwise. I remember the particular battle, right? I don't know if he had Thunderstrike yet, but if he did, there wasn't a lot of it. The casting AI was not especially generous to Phaeacia with what he had access to. So this, as shown by the battle report, I think this could have gone significantly worse for us, but it was actually relatively okay. So we lose roughly a third or quarter of our force there, half of which the losses are mannequins, so not too bad overall. And that is it. It's cold outside, baby. God of Phaeacia is permanently vanquished. So GG, our 2v1 has now become a 1v1. But we've got bad things happening, so can we make it matter, is the question. Unexpected events, we've got Misfortune 1 in Trotturn. Villains have tried to seize control of Belagor. That's a fair amount of villains, and there's not a lot here in Belagor. They are going to succeed. And Asphodel has been breached, right? This is a very sizable force. Notoriously, in Dominions 5, cavalry was not especially good at breaking fortifications. I haven't played a massive amount of Dominion 6 yet. I've played a fair amount of single player. I've played this game in multiplayer, and I've dabbled in kind of like some blitzes here or there, right? But I think mounted units are significantly better at breaking fortifications in Dominion 6 because they have their siege strength from both the knight and from the mount, which I believe in the past was counted singularly, right? Because it was just a single unit. So you'd have knights having like 2 or something like that kind of siege strength, whereas now it seems like it's quite a bit higher, right? Like you can rove around with stacks of mounted units. And in the past, you'd be like, I've got to bring a lot of chaff to break things, but now it's not so much. That being said, right, like, it's not the 77 knights that are doing all of the work here. It's also the 140 unicorns that are 2.3 siege strength apiece, which, that's not a small amount. As blessable units go, these guys are pretty fucking slick, honestly. So that's very concerning. We are not harmed in the Shadowglade, but that's not really what we would expect to be. And we are under siege in Belagor, and our walls are damaged. So let's take a look at what is going on in the game now. Phaeacia is gone. We're not at war with Ulm. We're at war with Man, which we've been losing territory to steadily. Our other flank is not yet exposed, except we also now have this flank that is exposed. So we'll talk about the Phaeacian territory now, now that war with Phaeacia is done. Immediately at this point, right, we're in a very dire situation. We still have a lot of strength, but what happens over the course of the next turns will determine whether or not we are actually able to fight Man or not. So, making a lot of diplomacy with Vanarus immediately, primarily over the instances of our border and this throne, right? We do have this little nubbin of land that's kind of shot out there. And then we do have this throne that is kind of a big concern. We've talked about this already, I believe, but probably Vanarus is going to end up having this portion of territory. And that's that. Honestly, Van had no reason to negotiate with us, and we are lucky that they are happy to just take what is offered rather than take what they want, because they probably could very easily. Up in the actual Phaeacian territory, we're doing some more recruitment, more Jade Maidens, more Hierophants to try to lead out reinforcement squads that we can try to fight with in this territory. And then in Vaclez itself, we don't really have the coin. We're starting to run low on money, so we're not really recruiting much there. We are moving a large portion of our army, the majority of it even, into Vongar to threaten Paloma, right? In this concept of, hey, you're threatening our capital, potentially going to take it, but presumably this is a massive portion of your forces. We have a massive force here to try to fight you with. We will try to threaten your capital and at least tie up forces that you are generating here, rather than you be able to send them down to fight me in my heartland, right? So that's the general concept there. Attacking up into Banded Hills, moving this little unit of mantises, which is just waiting to be killed, down into Bycliff, and reinforcing over into Vaclez with more stuff, right? We are not immediately dropping something like a temple in Vaclez because we really want the Phaeacian lands to honestly not have our dominion for as long as possible. That is mixed mixed, right? Because if we don't have our Dominion, we're not generating mannequins or things like that. But right now, we really, really need the money to be able to continue persecuting this war against man. I say persecuting this war against man, defending ourselves in this war against man, right? So we're also sneaking one of our pans back up towards the Forbidden Forest, potentially to maybe drop a fortification up there and start making use of the sages that we can have there. Also trying to knock off this army of villains with a stack of mannequins from the Forest of the Lost. So looking up at the actual battle with man at this current point in time, we've got a lot of little raiding parties going around. We're moving, this little stack of units into Icton. We are... Man, my mouse cursor is herky-jerky all over the place. Gotta get a new mouse. I gotta do that this weekend. Maybe I'll go do that after this. We are attacking into Sitha with a small troop, just with the assumption that there isn't going to be anything here left. Next turn, that it's probably just going to be a single PD, right? We got some minor attacks into Lovendalen and Namor, mostly the same kind of concept. Just trying to raid around and potentially cut avenues of retreat and reinforcement, right? The vast majority of these are low commitment. This is actually somewhat calculated as a concept of these guys are costing me money right now. And if I'm not going to use them in a main unit, I either want them to be fighting or dead, right? So that's another reason why we were just throwing them at Sitha. And the real situation now comes between Asphodel and Shadowglade. So we are under siege in Shadowglade, right? We are broken in Asphodel. I'm going to talk about Shadowglade first, right? So we have a siege break force coming up. Take a look at what all it is. Yeah, so we've got a siege break force coming up. A bunch of mannequins, primarily. With a few Minotaur warriors and some Black Centaurs. This is extremely low commitment, right? Why are we risking this being such an extremely low commitment? Well, first and foremost, I don't expect him to leave anything here. Maybe he leaves like a scout or some other commander here. I don't expect that he's going to leave his actual forces here. If he does, what I have sent might kill them, right? Because there's enough mannequins to face off against that many Knights of Avalon, along with the Minotaurs and Centaurs that I've sent, right? So that's kind of a calculated scenario. It's also a low commitment of if he moves something from Asphodel on here, or is somehow able to reinforce from, say, Sylvania through Lovendalen or something like that, if we lose what we threw out there, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But we do want to break free, because being stuck in here is it's a big fucking issue. Mostly. He's gonna have to fight this stack eventually. And we are 2 turns away from Enchantment 6, which is our Rigor Mortis spike, right? Relief Rigor Mortis spike, really, because we can do both of those very easily at the same time, right? So that's a big deal. We want to research anyways, so we want to break free. But it's not a huge deal if this doesn't work out for us especially well this turn. The question is whether or not he actually attacks into Asphodel this turn. Because with what we have here, Asphodel's gone. We do not have enough of a mage core to truly defend Asphodel. And that is unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It's not the end of the world for us, right? Obviously, we do have enough income that we want to be generating things with, like buying Black Centaurs and buying mages and stuff like that. But truthfully, at the end of the day, a capital for us is not as big a deal as it is for a lot of other nations. We can recruit our mages from anywhere, really. All Asphodel is offering us is the Black Centaur, Black Minotaur. And of course, right, the Carrion Grove giving us a shit ton of nature gems, which we don't want to lose, but we can get it back, right? Like, it's this concept of some nations losing their capital in the mid-game like this is almost a death knell. For us, if we lose our capital in the mid-game like this, if we're not already out, right? If we have forces that we can fight back with, we can get it back, right? Not the end of the world, but still dangerous. So, it is at this point that we kind of have to make this decision of, do we want to try to stand and fight with everything that we have here? Or, right, like, my mages are stealthy units, right? Like, I could stealth out this Panic Apostate, this Dryad Hag, this Centaur Hierophant. I could save myself the gold there. And I go back and forth on this concept a lot, because at the end of the day, I very well could sit here and howl this group with a bunch of mannequins behind this wall, and it might not win us the fight, but it could cause drastic issues, right? And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on this. And ultimately, I think I decided not to, purely based on the concept that with what we have here in Shadowglade, losing this Panic Apostate, which is a Death 3 Nature 4, which is a pretty good combination, would mean that we would have a harder time putting up other things that we wanted in a potential future big battle. I think I was rushed at the end of this turn, though, or maybe just conflicted, because I decided not to commit to howling this combat if he attacks this turn, which is fine, but I feel like the alternative is if you decide not to do that, then sneak all of your important people out into Shadowglade. And I just didn't do that, right? Like, I left my Panic Apostate here. Why not sneak them to Shadowglade? I left this Dryad Hag here. Why not sneak them to Shadowglade? Right? So I made the judgment call and then didn't do the thing. But you can see I prepped for the concept of keeping this fight, because we have this squad of 12 Black Minotaurs held in reserve back here with Group Barkskin and a Giant Strength Warriors, right? And this is potentially going to come into play as a deal, maybe not a big deal, but a deal. So we'll see how that actually goes. And I think honestly that's really kind of like the discussion at this point. We're recruiting things elsewhere, but really those are the big scenarios. Phaeacia dies this turn. We're threatening interior lands, more interior lands of man. Now that we're attacking from Phaeacia, we're negotiating with Vanarus, and man is potentially going to take our capital and has locked our large army inside Shadowglade, but we are 2 turns away from Rigor Mortis. That is the situation. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. It really helps me out. If you'd like to see me live, head over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/thedistanthorizon.